we're going to talk about the Azure portals and how we can use Azure portals to interact with Azure. But I want to take the opportunity before we dive into that to talk about the Azure architecture from the standpoint of clients, right? Now, when we talk about Azure, there's certain components of Azure that are really hidden from us that we're never going to directly interact with, right? You know, we're going to deal with virtual machines. So we've got virtual machines. We've got storage that we're going to deal with. We've got networking that we're going to deal with. But all of that is also really encapsulated in behind the scenes functionality. For example, hypervisor, Hyper-V. And then you also have something called App Fabric wrapping around that. And you can actually, read up on these things and see what's going on, but that's all kind of behind the scenes, right? But what is provided for us across everything in Azure, and by the way, yeah, this is as good as my lines get, I apologize. We have an API, right? And so everything that we do with everything going on in Azure is going to go through an API. And in fact, there's really two different versions of the API, all right? And you can kind of draw a line and say, we have two different versions. We have the ASM, which is version 1, and we have the ARM, which is version 2. ASM is the Azure Services Management Model, and ARM is the Azure Resources Management Model. And just a quick bit of history here, not too far. When Azure first came out, it had this service management model, and everything was managed kind of as an independent unit. And they developed certain objects within this and a structure that, frankly, didn't scale the way it needed to scale. So several years ago, they really re-architected the entire infrastructure, the entire API, came up with new objects, much more scalable, frankly, in many ways easier to use, and also designed a different API for it, and that's going to be the Azure Resource Manager. And one of the things you need to be aware of is that your tools, whether they are different tools that we can use to connect. For example, I may write client applications, as obviously we will talk about, right? These client applications probably are going to use an SDK. That SDK is going to communicate through the API, right? Well, there's going to be different SDK calls depending on whether that's going through the Azure Service Manager model or the Azure Resource Manager model. Most of what we're going to do in the course focuses on the Azure Resource model, but we will talk about both, okay? Now, the next thing that we have in terms of interacting with the Azure environment is we have command lines. Let's say command, all right? And there's two versions. I'm going to shorthand a little bit here. There's a PowerShell version of command line tools, if you're familiar with PowerShell. And there's also what we call the cross-plat client tools or cross-platform client tools. These are tools that work across not only Windows, but Linux and Apple operating systems as well. And as with the client SDK, there's versions of this for both ASM and the ARM. Now, the way they work actually is a little bit different depending on whether you're using PowerShell or the client tools, but that's not really that critical. All right, and the final interface, the one that we're really going to talk about here, is the portal. Okay, and the portal also, like the others, is working with both. There's a version for the ASM and there's a version for the ARM. The version for the ASM is sometimes called the original or the classic portal. It's actually a separate portal. And the version that works with the ARM is the current portal, is usually how we refer to them. Okay? And there were actually, you may see documentation, older documentation. There were previous versions of the portal. These are the two that are really pretty stable. Most of what we'll do will be in the current portal that's used in the ARM. However, we do have some interactions with the portal that works in the Azure Services Management model as well. So we're going to take a look at both of those, and you will work with both of those as well.